Hey everyone, it's Ed from Hustle Badger here. Today I'm speaking with Peter Nixey, who is the founder of Intentional IO, but is also an advisor for a multitude of different startups about all things AI.
You've got to understand the weaknesses and strengths of people like LLMs. So that's the way that tech works. Like, people put products into the market and people don't want them. So you will get stories that tell you why every single objection that somebody might come up with is wrong, because you've literally objected to the person. A good process is one that leads you from a crappy idea to a strong idea. The path to getting something people want is a straightforward function of the number of people you talk to, as long as you talk to them in the right way.
Hey everyone, it's Ed from Hustle Badger here. Today I'm speaking with Peter Nixey, who is the founder of Intentional IO, but is also an advisor for a multitude of different startups about all things AI.
Hi Ed, thanks for having me on. I am, as you said, the founder of Intentional IO. I'm a full stack developer. I do everything from Docker through to design. Intentional is a to-do list that's super nice, easy to use. It's on all platforms, and it focuses people around the amount of time that things are actually going to take them, rather than just creating a list that is a wish list. It shows you the things you've got planned for the day and a backlog of projects, and also how long that stuff's going to take you, so you make a more realistic day.
Amazing. I know you're spending a lot of time at the moment working with companies like Fyxer, who are having a lot of success at the moment. What is the kind of thing you usually do with them?
So when I first met them, Archie and Rich, who are the founders, first founders, then subsequently joined by their co-founder Matt, were actually running a completely different business. They were running a bricks and mortar business that did virtual assistants, not virtual assistants, but just virtual assistants, real people, for founders and execs. They built up a pool of about 60 different people who they hired out on a fractional basis. And when ChatGPT came out, I'd been doing a little bit of work with them, helping them think about automation in the business. I wrote them an email saying, you guys should probably look at this. I think it's kind of pretty fundamental to your business. The sequence that most founders go through is that the founder decides that they want to start a business. At the same time, they need a salary. And to get a salary, you need some investment. Founders go and they raise money, and then they have this story that's now ingrained, and they hire employees and they tell employees the story, and then they go out and build something. And at this point, they generally still haven't actually spoken to customers, or they've spoken to customers to the extent that they said, look, I'm building this, like, it's going to be great. Do you think it'll be great? And the customers are like, sure. And they're like, great, we'll see you in a year or two. And then a year or two passes and they come back and they give it to the customer, and the customer generally doesn't want it. It takes time to create something that's right. And by this time, they're running out of money. And so they go out and raise another round. That kind of second round is still generally a function of schlep rather than of product market fit. And at that point, they can't raise money. And so at that point, they go out and talk to customers and they start finding out what problems people really have. A lot of the work that I do with people is basically pulling that stage all the way back up to the front of the company. The point when the founder has no interest, there's all the momentum, all of the energy, all of the enthusiasm, and they're like, screw that, I know what people want, I'm going to build it. But if I can get them to do this process at the start, what it means is that they are much more likely to have the experience Fyxer had, which was that when they went to market, they knew they had something that people were willing to pay for, because they knew that they were already paying for it elsewhere.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit more about that process. What does that look like? Because it sounds like it was very structured at Fyxer.
Fyxer were in a very unusual position. They were able to do something that I think a lot of existing non-AI companies are in a good position to do, but it's different than the process that I would recommend that individuals do. If you're in an existing non-AI company, you have a bunch of information about things your clients are paying you for, some of which are able to be accelerated or maybe completely automated by AI. And so if you introspect what you're currently delivering to your customers, you can look for opportunities for things that you can either do way more efficiently, or, as Fyxer did, spin out into an entirely new product. So the process with them was a very introspective process where we went systematically through what their clients were paying them for. We looked for repeated patterns in things. We whittled those down by the things that we thought AI could actually deliver on. And then those became the subset of features that they went to market with. That's quite different than how I work with individuals, though. It requires quite a different process when you don't have that bank of existing data.
It's super interesting that they've got that deep kind of industry expertise, and I can see that would give them a big advantage. Let's talk about, what do you do if you don't have that sort of expertise or track record already?
In that case, it is a function of interviews. I have confidence that the path to getting something people want is a straightforward function of the number of people you talk to, as long as you talk to them in the right way. If you talk to them in the right way, then you will reach something good. Those two conditions are met, that you use the right techniques and you talk to enough people, then that process will bring you to something that people want, with a caveat. And that caveat is the second thing that most founders don't do at the start of the business, which is that the things that people want will not necessarily coincide with the things that you want to build as a business and that will satisfy you as a business. So one thing is establish the criteria for what really matters to you and really be clear about that. And those will be different things for different people. And then the next thing is you have to run interviews with customers with a real structure. And I teach a structure that I call the sandwich interview. It's an interview that has 3 stages to it.
Great. So let's hear about that then.
So Rob Fitzpatrick, who many of your listeners probably know, wrote the MOM test. We actually went through Y Combinator together. There's a lot of really, really good stuff in the MOM test, and it's well worth reading. So Rob teaches quite correctly that what you don't want to go in and is go in and lead the witness and look for affirmation that your thing is going to work. And it's called the mom test because you go to your mom and you're like, I'm going to do this thing. And she's like, that sounds amazing, Ed. I'm so happy for you. I'm sure it's going to be a big success. And you're like, yes, it is, mum. You're right. And so you go off and build it. But of course, that doesn't really tell you anything because she just loves you and wants you to succeed. And the idea behind the mum test is to ask the questions that find out whether or not somebody really needs it. And Matt Lerner teaches a lot of this around kind of jobs to be done as well. So if we are talking about, let's use one of the products that I'm helping develop through this company, Inaugural. That's a product for parents who've got children of school age. They're getting a ton of emails and comms from the school. They are deluged by that, and it's a real hassle. And we had a thesis that was going to be valuable to them to have an AI read all of those emails and distill out just what applies to their children, and was very useful. The process for doing that requires 3 things. One, it requires figuring out what they're currently doing, how acute the pain really is, and what the ways that they're currently solving it are, and how frequently they're solving it, and whether they're aware of it. The second part of the interview that is different than what Rob teaches, but I think is super important, I'll explain why, is to then pitch your solution to the customer. Traditionally in customer development, you never pitch. You just kind of find out all the jobs to be done and everything else. I teach that you should pitch. And the reason I teach that you should pitch is because if you don't pitch, you will never validate whether or not your solution is viable. And if you think about this, in every market where you can think of something that smashed it, you can also think of several things that haven't smashed it. And so if they only ever did the customer development and pitched and did the first part of it, they would never find out that they were on the wrong course.
So how do you pitch an idea then without leading the witness?
You don't. You do lead the witness. But in the third part of the interview, you unashamedly lead the witness. You full on pitch and sell, right? But in the third part of the interview, you switch tack. And in the third part of the interview, you try and dissuade the person. You fully go devil's advocate, and you try and dissuade that person they're going to use it. And you actually use all of the objections. So you do the opposite of what you do in a sales call. In a sales call, you want to surface objections up front and diffuse them up front so as they don't blow you out of the water later on. In the sandwich interview, you surface objections up front and you get as many of them as possible. And then you actually aim to detonate those objections at the most vulnerable time, which is the end of the interview. And you resurface them all. And you bring them back to the customer and you say, but hang on, you said that you never use software and that the school doesn't actually send you that many emails. And you use the third part of the interview to try and dissuade them that any enthusiasm they had in the second part, which to be clear, is usually not very much, because like usually you're not pitching something that people want, but you try and dissuade them that they are actually going to use it, and you use all of the reasons that they gave you in the first part to try and dissuade them. At the end, you end up with these incredibly powerful customer stories that really constitute the like steel girders of a foundation or an infrastructure that you can then build a company around. So you will get stories that tell you why every single objection that somebody might come up with is wrong, because you've literally objected to the person who may have that objection, and they've told you why the objection is invalid. And if you push something through all three stages of that and it holds, you have something that's viable.
So sandwich method then, first layer is you're asking people about their problems, it's jobs to be done, it's frequency, it's severity of the problem. Second layer, then you're pitching your concept, trying to convince them it's a great idea. And then in the third and final layer, you're kind of going back to the original jobs to be done and sort of reframing those as objections and kind of trying to blow your own idea out the water.
In all honesty, most interviews don't even make it to stage 2. Most of the things that people want to build, people don't want to use. We know that. We see that all the time. That's the way that tech works. Like, people put products into the market and people don't want them. And so actually, when you start doing the jobs to be done, very often the second part doesn't end up the most enthusiastic pitch, because you're like, okay, well, we've already established there is no job to be done. But just so as you know,
sure,
this is what I'm thinking and this is how it'd be useful. And they're like, yeah, I wouldn't use it. And you never even have to do the devil's advocate.
And if we go back to one of the examples you're working with, and maybe just take one feature or one need, like how would that kind of feed through the 3 stages then?
Let's take this Poppy, which is an AI for reading kids' emails. Somebody actually wrote to me and said, look, Jess Butcher wrote a missive to me of like all the things she wanted as a parent of 3 boys of school age. And so I wrote to another friend who had 3 kids, and I was like, how does this sound to you? And she was like, oh my God. Like, she just immediately forwarded me several emails. And she was like, the worst thing about these, they're not even in the email. Like, she sent me emails where it's like a link to a PDF, which, like, if you're on the underground in London, it's not a lot of use. So this is going to be, I'm not sure whether this is a great example or a bad example, because this really had product market fit straight out of the gate. It's not like a lot of the other things I did. But so what I would do is start the interview off by talking to somebody about, I'd say, look, I just want to talk to you a little bit about some of the comms around your child. And we'd find out the information. How many children have you got? Like, what age are they? Are they in school? Are they not? Are they in after school club? We now call this prompt engineering, like it used to be called interviewing. But I'll be looking to prompt engineer the person to start surfacing the things from their memory that are relevant to this. So I'll be like, okay, so what school are they in? And I'll say, what's the last email that you got from the school? I won't ask frequency and I won't ask patterns. I will ask for the last one and the one before that and the one before that, because that's how you infer frequency. People have no like understanding of frequency. You've got to understand the weaknesses and the strengths of people, like LLMs. And people can't tell you what they ate. Yes, like they can't tell you in general what they eat, but you can go through what they specifically ate yesterday if you take them through the day. So same with these types of things. So I'll say to them, okay, what are the last emails you got from the school, and have them sent it over. And they would send it over, and I was like, oh my God, I would not like to read this. And so I'll say, okay, so tell me about those challenges with this. And they will tell me, well, look, half this email isn't about my kids at all. Like, it's about kids in other years. It's about events that they're not going to. Like, I've got to read so much crap in order to deal with what my kid has to deal with. And then I've got to like pull it out and put it in the calendar. And then I've got to remember to make sure that they do come in fancy dress on World Book Day, and like which thing they're going to do. And I've got to share that with my husband or wife. And the whole thing's like a super hassle. So that is an example of really, really interesting like jobs to be done. Like, you can tell that as we're talking about that, you're like, okay, there's some real meat on the bone here. So I'll keep on moving around that, and I'll find out, okay, well, how frequently are they getting these emails? How many kids have they got? Like, what age group kids is this affecting? It doesn't affect our kid. Like, we get one email from this family, and like, it's fine. I would rather they sent the details in email, but it's not a problem. I log into the thing. But these often are people who've got multiple kids in multiple schools, comms from all of these, and comms from after school sports and everything, and it's a nightmare for them. And they will talk me through it, and I'll be like, how much time are you spending? Like, what are the support do you have? Like, who helps you with this? Like, how much do you pay for that support? Does your nanny read it? Can you trust your nanny? Valid benchmarks on how much people are spending on this as a problem. I'm also going to try to pre-tease out ways in which I know our product might fail. Ways I might know my product might fail is, like, what if it doesn't get 100% right? So I'll be saying to them, like, do you get everything? Like, is the problem that you get everything or just the time? And they'll be like, no, half the time I miss stuff. Or they might say, no, I have to get everything. Like, I will read through all of it and I'll store that away because I need to test at the end, does that requirement that they've now implied to me mean that our potential product is going to fail?
Yeah.
So I'm storing that away. I'm like, either way, I'm going to push on that. I'm going to push that pain point at the end of the conversation, but I'm storing it away. Then I'm storing away things like, I'll be pre-figuring out potential objections. So I'm like, have you ever integrated anything with your email? And what email do you get this on? Does it go to your work address? Where I'm like, that's going to be bad news because they're not going to have admin access to that. Or does it go to your home address? Like, have you plugged other things in? Do you feel comfortable with that? Tell me about something that you did plug in, didn't plug in.
And that's all just like the first stage, right? So then what happens in the second stage and the third stage?
So in the second stage, I unapologetically go in and pitch the product and a price point as well. That's really important. Like, you don't learn price point lessons by asking somebody what they pay. You learn them by giving them a price and finding out, do they say I want it or do they say I don't want it?
Okay.
So in the second part, I'll say, great, okay, Ed, so let me tell you about Poppy, which is the solution that we're building. And like, I'm not like we're planning or anything else. I'm just like, this is what's coming. I want you to be imagining this as real as possible.
You're pitching all the benefits there. What kind of feedback are you looking for from the person you're speaking to?
At that point, I'm not looking for feedback. I'm just looking to make this real in their minds. And like, I want to make it as real as possible. Like, ideally, I'd have screens and a demo. I need them to fully visualize what this product is going to look like if it's real and in their life. Because sometimes these things, like, A, people aren't product people. They can't visualize these things. It does take some picturing of it. Like, B, they can't, like, as I say, ideally I would have a demo show them. And with something like that, it's easy enough. Like, you just take an email and then you handwrite an email and you forward it in underneath and you show it to them. And then they go, oh, wow, that's really cool. Or like, meh, whatever.
So then does that, you pitch them then the idea, you make it as real as possible, maybe visuals if you've got them, and then you move on to the third section?
Yeah. So at this point, like, I'm really establishing, do they know, have they visualized how this is going to work? Have I really communicated this? Plus the nitty gritty of it. And then at that stage, now with this, most people are pretty enthusiastic. Like, not everyone. The developer who's building it for us has like 4 kids and he was like, I wouldn't use it. It's fair enough, right? And so like at that point, there's no need to go to the 4th section. You're just like, well, tell me why and tell me why it wouldn't work. And like, you usually pick it up and they're like, well, I don't deal with this. My wife deals with it. And you're like, well, okay, it's not going to help you. That doesn't mean it's not a useful tool for her. It just means you're not the target market.
Right.
Or they'll say, look, we do this. And frequency is something that's really important, right? Like, loads of people go after problems classically, like arranging travel, that people just don't do very frequently. And they'll be like, and at the end of that, at the end of the pitch, I'll say, okay, so then it's going to cost you £15 a month and it'll be ready from January. So tell me what your thoughts are, Ed. How do you feel about it? And you will now come back to me with a very realistic view on whether or not you're going to buy this. Now, if you are enthusiastic, which most of the time in these interviews, somebody won't be, a good process should result in a lot of interviews where people aren't enthusiastic, because a good process is one that leads you from a crappy idea to a strong idea. A good process is not one that starts with you being lucky and then ends, right? The process that people really want is something that gets them something great, which means implicitly that they're starting with something not great.
Okay. So I get that. So it's almost like you're saying, if the needs aren't there, if the first layer doesn't work, then you almost don't need to go on to the second layer. And if the second layer doesn't generate enthusiasm, you don't need to go on to the third section.
Correct.
But assuming you've found that need, assuming you've got a product that people are like, oh, this sounds really cool, then you're kind of throwing objections back at it, are you?
Yeah. So now I want to filter out the enthusiasm that somebody has now picked up from my enthusiasm. I want to like now filter for polarization and pleasing. And I want to get rid of all of that. And I want to find out, did it hit? So I'll then say, Ed, look, I'm super happy that like you were into this. Like obviously we're psyched. We'd love to build this product. But I want to ask you a couple of questions. Like at the start of the interview, you told me that you like begrudge paying for Spotify and Netflix, and you pay for nothing else. Like you cancel all subscriptions. You told me that you go through once a month on your bank statement and just cancel everything. So if you forgive me from asking, I find it really hard to imagine that you would keep this. Like,
Yeah.
would you not cancel it immediately? And then you will tell me something useful at that point, and you'll say, Pete, trust me, I do. I cancel everything, but this is not in that category. Like we've missed so much crap, and like it hurt me so much when our child went in like uniform instead of fancy dress. Like I never want that to happen again. And these are
Okay.
like genuine stories that people say, and you're like, I don't care paying £15 a month for it. Like I'd pay £20 a month to avoid that happening, like forever. Or you'll say, yeah, actually, you're right. Like I'm psyched that you're building it. I'm sure somebody's going to use it. Maybe I would. We'll have to see, but I probably wouldn't pay it. And so I'll go through all of those objections. I'll say, well, listen, you said it's on your work account, and like it would mean integrating with your email. Like, are you even allowed to do that? Like, do you know anybody else who's done that? I will say, like you said to me at the start, that actually you're quite happy with your school setup, and um, like you don't get that many emails, and yeah, you'd rather get it in email, but you really going to pay £15 for that? Like I wouldn't, would you? So I'm polarizing so that I use really permissive language that permits them and encourages them to object to it. And when they
Got it.
don't, every single story that they tell me becomes one of those like infrastructure girders that holds up the roof of what you then go on to build.
How long are these interviews typically taking?
Maybe because I talk a lot, but I find it takes an hour.
It
Like,
takes an hour. And how
yeah.
how many would you say you'd usually need to do? I mean, I guess you're going to go through different iterations then, but is there like an average number or something you'd say it takes to get to a good
So
answer?
I'm looking for convergence. So I'm looking, and by convergence, I mean, like in the positive case, you get convergence where you now start to know the profile of basically what happens is like you start off with something that nobody wants. If you're really lucky, and I've pitched many of these things over the years, and Poppy was like unusually good. Let's take an example of something else, an iteration of the last product I was building. I was pitching a version of that, and like it was just failing. And I did 30 interviews, and I could tell that like people were coming back with enthusiasm, but the economics of the appetite that they had and weren't strong enough to support the product. And so I was looking in those interviews for something adjacent that was resonating at a price point and an appetite that I did fulfill my criteria for the company that I wanted. And then I was iterating the interviews and just like repitching that. So as I say, a good process in this is not one that starts off and succeeds. Like a
Sure.
well executed process starts off failing and gets to success. That's a good process. Another one is just lucky. And to do that, what you need to, the other point that I didn't talk about in this, because we kind of talked about the happy path, but in the unhappy path, which is the normal one, what you're listening for are spikes of pain points. When you're going through those jobs to be done, you're listening for things where you're like, oh, there is pain there. I didn't think this was a thing, but holy moly, like that's an issue. Maybe you start off by pitching pubs like an AI system to take bookings for them over the phone, and they're just not fussed. But as they talk you through stuff, they're like, look, I have to sit down every evening and spend an hour just like sending off our orders to like all of our suppliers and making sure chasing up the ones that aren't there. Um, I didn't spend very long on the phones. We're on our feet anyway. Like we're not going to use it. Now the smart founder will at that point pivot straight from phones to an email integration for managing suppliers. And be like,
Yeah.
tell me more about that. Tell me more about the time that takes and like what you could do with the time if you weren't doing it.
Okay.
So you're listening for those pain points. And the other thing about that is that a good process results in a lot of discarded ideas. So you want a strong process and very loosely held product theses. And your goal is not to build the product that's in your head. Your goal is to get something where customers are like, holy crap, Ed, like if you build this, like I am already there.
I love this process. And I think, a lot of people have come across jobs to be done, or, they've probably done elements of this if they've been on that 0 to 1 journey. But I love this kind of sandwich process you've got of doing the jobs to be done, then the pitch, and then the ejections. That strikes me as super, super smart. Is there, before we wrap up, are there any other sort of tips you'd give someone if they were going to try and do this on their own?
There's some like really basic mechanic, pipework and plumbing things about it. So empirically, all founders end up selling in concentric circles that go out from themselves. They always sell to people around them. And this process will always start with people around you. So the way this process, people get very intimidated by queuing up the interviews and by just making the interviews happen. You have to, there is a lot of schlep at the start. You have to just reach out, ask people, be unashamed to ask people near you, ask for 20 minutes. People will frequently give you an hour, but like just ask for like 15 or 20 minutes and take as much as they give you. But like if they're interested, the conversation will go on. At the end of every interview, ask for exactly one referral, not more than one, not less than one.
Okay.
If you ask for more than one, people will be overwhelmed and they'll never do it. If you ask for fewer than one, you will get none. So you ask for one, you get them to say the name of the person that you should talk to. They're like, who's another person who's in this space that you think I should talk to?
Yeah.
Like, would you be happy to intro them? Then immediately follow up with them and ask. Along the way, you also want to keep very, very, very detailed notes of the things that resonated. Like, it's very easy to keep a full transcript now, obviously, but in addition to that, and actually, to be honest, even if you dump the transcript into O1 and ask it to pull these questions out, you should keep the things that resonated, the objections, look for the spikes, like, and keep all of that and distill all of that out so that when you come back, like I've run this process on one product and it took 90 interviews to get to resonance. Like with Poppy, it took like, by the time you get to like 4 customers who are saying the same thing and they want it, you're in a good place. Past that point, you're starting to refine marketing terminology and customer profile and how to get to them, but you've got something. But because it can take a lot of not having the right thing to get to the right thing, the thing that you want is that when you start, and this is what happened in that particular case, like by the 90th interview, I was like, hang on, I heard this in like early interviews, but you can't remember what you really heard. You can remember a bit about what you felt. You need to go right back, read the actual transcripts and be like, yeah, that really was a problem. And then you double down on it and you come back.
I love it. Well, look, Peter, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. This has been fantastic, full of really practical tips for people. So let's wrap up there. I'll say thank you very much for your time. And we will include, if people want to follow up, want to hear more about you or the help that you provide, we'll have all your links in the show notes.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ed.
Super. Thanks, Peter.
Cheers. Bye-bye.